Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to our weekly explained session. The topic for today is the summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or the SCO, which is currently taking place in Uzbekistan as we speak. It happens to be a hot topic of the week. So in this session, we are going to understand what is the SCO, what is its significance, and what is India's equation with this organization. We shall also talk about the importance of the annual summit that is being currently held. But before we begin, do express your support by liking the video, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So let's start with the discussion by first understanding why is this topic in news and why it is an important topic for your exams. See, the SCO, or the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is a very important regional organization that is mainly centered around the Central Asia region. The primary focus of this group is the Central Asia region. Central Asia occupies a very important position in global geopolitics, primarily because of its location and the resources that are present in Central Asia. So in this context, the SCO summit, which is being held today and as well as yesterday, it began yesterday essentially. This summit acquires a lot of significance because SCO is a dominant influence in and around the Central Asia region. This happens to be the first in-person summit of SCO which is being held in the last 2 years. Because over the last 2 years, an in-person summit has not been held, mainly due to the pandemic. As a result of the pandemic, SCO summits were being held virtually. So after a long gap, an in-person summit is taking place at Samarkand, the capital of Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan is the current chair of SCO and it is hosting the summit, and all the members are participating in this annual summit and several key outcomes are expected. So in this context, it becomes very important to study the SCO in complete detail. It's a very important topic for your prelims and mains. A number of questions can be expected from this particular topic. So let's begin by talking about the background to SCO. Let's understand what is this organization. Let's look at its composition, its role, and the key initiatives of this grouping. And after that, we'll talk about the current summit, the ongoing summit, and understand the latest developments. The SCO, or the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it is an intergovernmental grouping, a Eurasian intergovernmental grouping that brings together several countries from the Eurasia region. It brings together several key powers of the Eurasia region, and the grouping is mainly focused on the Central Asia region. So this intergovernmental organization, it is essentially focused on political issues, economic issues, military and security issues as well. Of late, SCO has diversified into other areas like climate change, tourism, and etc. So it's in this context that SCO acquires a high profile, and it is considered to have great potential to promote regional cooperation in and around the Eurasia region. This grouping is considered to be the world's largest regional organization in terms of its geographical area and population. Now, this is a very significant statistic. This particular fact shows that SCO acquires a lot of global significance mainly because of its reach. If you look at its members and look at their geographical area, they account for nearly 60% of the area of Eurasia. They also account for 40% of the global population, and their combined GDP stands at more than 30% of the global GDP. So in terms of human resource and in terms of economic potential, this grouping holds a very high value for the members and as well as for the region. It accounts for a significant percentage of the global population and the global GDP, and as a result, SCO becomes a prominent grouping of the Eurasia region. Now, if you go back in time and look at the formation of this grouping, you will see that SCO had its origin in a grouping called the Shanghai Five. The Shanghai Five is seen as the predecessor of SCO. Before the SCO, there was a grouping called Shanghai Five, formed in the year 1996. It was established with the initiative of Russia and China. Russia and China were the lead countries which took up the initiative to form this group called the Shanghai Five, and they brought together a few Central Asian countries such as Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. So these 5 countries, which are key powers of Central Asia, they came together to form the Shanghai Five, and the grouping was mainly centered and focused upon this region that you're seeing in the map. It was mainly focused upon the Central Asia region and acts as a dominant group of Eurasian countries. Following this development, a few years later in 2001, a new member was added to the group, which was Uzbekistan. Another Central Asian country joined this group as a member, and now the group was renamed and reorganized as the SCO. So that's how the Shanghai Five became the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It was established through a treaty signed in 2002. The SCO Charter, which provides for its constitution, was also adopted, and it came into force in the year 2003. So this marked the beginning of SCO, and since then, the grouping has gained more significance with its continued expansion. New members have been added over the years, and recently India and Pakistan were admitted into the group, and they formally joined SCO as well in 2017 during the Astana Summit. So the inclusion of India and Pakistan, which until then were just observers of SCO, it brought a great deal of advantage to the grouping. India, Pakistan, which were just observer states until then, they became full-time members, and they added more weightage to this group. So now the group was expanding towards the South Asia region as well, thereby further enhancing its influence. So as a result, 8 members became a part of it, and this group started focusing on political, economic, trade, cultural ties, and as well as on defense and security relations. On all these key issues, SCO members started collaborating, and it quickly emerged as one of the most dominant groupings of the region. But last year, there has been an even bigger development. During last year's summit that was held at Dushanbe, Iran was also admitted, and Iran is all set to become the 9th member of SCO. So this development makes SCO all the more important for our exams because it happens to be a very big geopolitical development. Until last year, Iran was also just an observer state. It would only be invited to participate as an observer. Observer states have limited powers. They can't table their own resolutions. They can't vote as compared to the members who enjoy full powers in a regional grouping. So Iran, which was an observer until then, was admitted as a full-time member, and this year Iran has completed the formal process of joining the SCO. So this is another big development in relation to this grouping. During the ongoing summit at Samarkand, Iran has signed the required documents. It has fulfilled the legal obligations that were needed, and it has all set to become a full-time member, a permanent member of the SCO. So this takes the overall membership of SCO to 9 countries. 9 countries that are spread across Eurasia, right, including Central Asia and South Asia as well. Apart from these 9 members, you should be familiar with the observer states and the dialogue partners of SCO as well. As of today, there are 3 observer states in the group, which includes Afghanistan, Belarus, and Mongolia. Amongst these observer states, Belarus also has applied for membership. Belarus is also seeking full-time membership of the group and has applied last year. So what you need to observe is that SCO is constantly undergoing expansion. It is increasing its footprint in the region by adding more members, by bringing in new countries which are key powers of the Eurasia region. If you look at the dialogue partners who also participate in these gatherings, in these summits, there are 6 countries which have been given the dialogue partner status. Even small powers like Sri Lanka, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Cambodia, and Turkey, which is a major power of West Asia, all these countries are working with SCO as dialogue partners who engage in dialogue with the SCO grouping. Last year, during the 2021 summit, even Egypt, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia have shown interest to be included as dialogue partners, and very soon these West Asian powers will also be brought into the group as dialogue partners. So the point I'm trying to highlight is that the membership or the composition of the group is expanding, and this highlights the growing significance of SCO in global geopolitics. Very quickly, it is emerging as a key regional organization, and it provides Russia and China, especially the lead countries of SCO, an opportunity to counter the Western countries by using SCO as a platform. This is one of the primary interests of Russia and China in this group. They see this as a platform led by these 2 countries through which they can counter the dominance of Western countries such as US and the European countries. So now let's talk about the focus areas of this grouping. Let's understand as to what are the key areas in which SCO is working, so that it gives us the context in which the current summit is taking place. It will help you better understand the latest developments that have happened over the last couple of days. This group is focused on political stability of the region. It's one of the top priority areas for SCO. Because see, Central Asia has seen long periods of political instability. If you look at the history of Central Asia region, during the Cold War period, that is before 1991, before the collapse of the Soviet Union, all the Central Asian republics, they were part of the former Soviet Union. But as Soviet Union disintegrated and collapsed and brought the Cold War to an end, these Central Asian republics, they broke away from the Soviet Union and became independent countries. So essentially we have 5 Central Asian countries. Now if you observe, out of these 5 Central Asian countries, only 4 of them are members of SCO. So I want you to take an exercise over here, take an assignment. Identify which is the 5th Central Asian country which is not a member of SCO. And also try to find out the reason why this country has not joined SCO. Identify these key points and see if you can post this in the comment section below. Is that clear? There is one Central Asian country which has not joined this group. It is not a member of SCO at all. It has never tried to apply for membership to this grouping. So when 4 countries have joined, what's the reason which is keeping that 5th country away? So identify this Central Asian country and also look at the reason why this country has not joined SCO and post this in the comment section. So this region which disintegrated from the Soviet Union, it has seen a lot of political instability over the years. Many governments here have been autocratic. There has been suppression of fundamental rights. There is a concern with regard to rising radicalism and fundamentalism. There are various fundamentalist groups, terror outfits operating as well in and around the Central Asia region. So over the last 20 to 30 years, many Central Asian countries like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, they've all seen a lot of instability. So ensuring political stability in the region is a primary focus of SCO. So Russia and China, which are the most influential powers here, they are helping the Central Asian countries to tackle the political threats and the security threats. In this region, there is a intense competition that goes on with various powers, including US, European Union, and other countries, which are also competing for influence in Central Asia. Central Asia is blessed with resources, and even the Western countries are very eager to exploit the Central Asian resources. Countries like US, they even have a military presence in the region. They have military bases located in Central Asia. So obviously Russia and China perceive this as a strategic threat, and they would like to counter the Western influence. So in the middle of this great game, in the middle of this great geopolitical game that goes on in Central Asia, ensuring political stability, ensuring regional security has become a top focus of SCO. Because that is the priority for Russia and China. They want to keep external powers away, especially the Western countries. They want to bring political stability to these Central Asian countries so that Russia and China can retain their traditional dominance. Apart from this, SCO is also focused on counter-terrorism and tackling organized crime. This is another priority area of cooperation. Because see, Central Asia is located in close proximity to the Afghanistan-Pakistan region, which is a global hub of terrorism. So the radicalism and terrorism present in and around Afghanistan has spilled over into Central Asia and creates a security threat in Central Asia as well. So with regard to the presence of radical groups and terrorist groups in the region, Russia and China have very serious concerns. Russia is concerned because it fears that radicalism could spread towards its territories. Because in Russia as well, you have a region called the Caucasus region, where Russia witnesses radicalism and terrorism. There are terror outfits operating in the Caucasus region which are waging a war against the Russian state. They engage in acts of terrorism. So Russia is deeply concerned about the presence and spread of radicalism in the belt. China also has a similar concern with regard to its Xinjiang province. In the westernmost province of China, that is Xinjiang, which borders Central Asia, there is a radical group, a terrorist outfit called ETIM, the East Turkestan Islamic Movement, which is set up by the Uyghur community of the region. The Uyghurs have always felt oppressed and targeted by the Chinese state. So to fight back against Chinese oppression, they have taken up radicalism. They have set up a terror outfit, and they share close links with other radical groups of Central Asia and Afghanistan and Pakistan. So China is deeply worried about the spillover effect of radicalism from the Afghanistan-Pakistan belt. So countering terrorism is a major focus area for SCO, and they've even set up a platform for this called RATS, R-A-T-S. It stands for Regional Anti-Terrorist Structure. I'll repeat, RATS or RATS. It's a counter-terror platform under SCO that stands for Regional Anti-Terrorist Structure. So through this platform, the members are working together to counter terrorism and to share intelligence with each other. Their primary focus is on tackling radicalism, cutting financing for the terror groups, and working together so that they can neutralize the terror outfits that are operating in and around Central Asia. This region has also become a hub of organized crime, because Afghanistan especially, it's part of a region called the Golden Crescent. Afghanistan and Pakistan, they are part of the region called Golden Crescent, which is a hub of illicit activities or organized criminal activities. Afghanistan is a major drug producing hub. Various drugs including opium is produced in Afghanistan in large quantities, and drug trafficking and arms trafficking is a very serious security concern. Pakistani agencies like the ISI have close connections as well with these criminal cartels. So a lot of revenue generated from drug trafficking, arms smuggling is diverted towards terror financing as well. So this is a serious concern in the region, and it affects Central Asia. It affects the larger Eurasia as well. So that's why SCO is focused on tackling organized crime, because it's a priority for Russia and China. Along with that, the group is focused on promoting economic relations, trade relations between the members, and to establish connectivity projects to create essential critical infrastructure so that the resources of Central Asia could be exploited for the mutual benefit of the members. As I mentioned earlier, Central Asia is blessed with natural resources. If you look at countries like, let's say, Kazakhstan, Kazakhstan is blessed with uranium. It has hydrocarbon reserves. Then countries like Turkmenistan is blessed with natural gas. Many countries have gold, then copper, tin. They are even blessed with rare earth elements. So strategic metals are present, uranium, hydrocarbon reserves, hydropower. So in Central Asia, you see that there is a significant presence of these natural resources, and Russia and China are deeply interested in exploiting them for their mutual benefit. So for exploiting these natural resources, what you need is good connectivity. You need better infrastructure, you need better roads, railway networks, oil, gas pipelines. And that's exactly the focus of China in particular, because China is rapidly expanding its Belt and Road Initiative into these Central Asian countries. All these Central Asian countries, they are part of China's Belt and Road Initiative. So China, in collaboration with Russia, is stepping up infrastructure creation, establishment of connectivity projects, so that they can give a boost for economic and trade relations. This is a top focus as well for SCO. And finally, the group has diversified into other key areas like environment cooperation, tackling climate change, protection of biodiversity, promoting cultural ties and relations in the field of tourism. All these areas have been prioritized, and they happen to be the focus areas of SCO. So in this context, it's important to understand the latest summit that is taking place at Samarkand. It's also important to understand how is this group relevant for India? What is India's equation with Pakistan at the SCO? What is India's equation with China at this platform? Because if you look at our bilateral relations with Pakistan and China, there are a lot of tensions in these relations. We often share a hostile relationship with each other. So if that is the case, how can India, China or India, Pakistan collaborate? How can they cooperate and work together at a platform like SCO? So these are some serious questions that come up which requires deep analysis, and that is exactly what we are going to do in the next 20 to 25 minutes. Until now, whatever we discussed was a very factual discussion. The facts are essential for your prelims to understand the origin of SCO, its focus areas, its priority areas. But now we need to focus on the latest developments and evaluate the issues surrounding SCO and its relevance for India. This analysis can be very, very important for your mains because you can expect a question over here. So during the ongoing summit at Samarkand, Iran is joining the group as a full-time member. It was accepted last year itself, but during the Samarkand summit, Iran has completed the formal process and it is all set to become the 9th member of the group. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it is a very significant geopolitical development because it gives an opportunity for like-minded countries such as Iran, Russia and China to collaborate and work together. These three countries have common interests. They are often aligned together against the Western countries, especially against the United States. I'm sure many of you would be aware that the US has even imposed economic sanctions against all the three countries. The US has targeted Iran with economic sanctions over its nuclear weapons program. US has targeted Russia with economic sanctions because of its repeated aggression. It started imposing sanctions when Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine. This was in 2014. And recently, when Russia invaded Ukraine and triggered the conflict, the US has hit back along with European countries to punish Russia economically by imposing stringent economic sanctions. Then with China as well, US has placed few sanctions for China's violations in Xinjiang and in Tibet. So US and these countries, they have constant tensions going on between them. US and Russia on one hand, they're still not out of the Cold War rivalry. Even though the Cold War ended and Soviet Union disintegrated, the successor state to Soviet Union, which is Russia, has picked up a rivalry with the US and their geopolitical conflict continues, especially in the Eurasia region. China, on the other hand, which has emerged as a global power, it is openly challenging the global domination of the US as a global superpower. So this triggers a new Cold War between US and China has a strong motivation to counter American influence in its neighborhood, because Central Asia is in the neighborhood of China. Iran, which has been deeply hit by the aggression and the policies of US, is also concerned about the rising influence of Western countries, and it has always aligned with Russia and China, which are close allies of Iran, to counter the Western countries. So now for the first time, these three countries are coming together at a key platform, and this might give them the opportunity to further coordinate their actions against the West. So that is something experts are watching out for. Many strategic experts have pointed out that SCO might become an even more prominent grouping and a platform where these three countries would start collaborating and use the platform to further their influence to weaken or counter Western influence. So here you need to note that during the ongoing Samarkand summit, Russian President Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping are meeting for the first time. They are interacting for a long period for the first time after the start of the Russia-Ukraine war. Now this in itself is a significant development to watch out for, because since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, China has been under tremendous pressure to scale down its ties with Russia. As Western countries have targeted Russia with sanctions, China has been placed under pressure to scale down its ties and relations with Russia. So it would be interesting to watch what China would do and how China would further its ties with Russia, because Russia and China happen to be close allies as far as their political and economic relations are concerned. So after a long time, the two leaders are interacting, that too at a formal platform. And if you observe China's behavior of the last few months since the Russia-Ukraine war began, China has never been critical of Russia. It has not supported any of the resolutions brought up at the UN which targeted Russia. It has helped Russia economically as well by bypassing the economic sanctions. China has continued its oil trade, and thereby it has helped Russia to withstand the impact of the economic sanctions. So that's the reason why strategic experts in Western countries, they would closely watch the meeting between the two leaders, as it would give us an indication about Russia-China collaboration in their objective to counter the Western countries. See, the SCO, like I said, is seen by these three powers as a platform through which they can counter the West and counter platforms, Western platforms like the NATO. As you know, NATO and its expansion towards Eastern Europe was one of the primary reasons why Russia went to war with Ukraine. Russia says that it was the US and the NATO which triggered Russia to exert pressure on Ukraine and eventually invade the country, because NATO was expanding its membership towards Eastern Europe as US and West European countries sought to extend their influence towards Eastern Europe. These areas we are talking about, that is East Europe, Central Asia, these areas are traditional areas of influence of Russia. Since the Soviet era, obviously the predominant influence here is Russia and China. So they don't tolerate any expansionism from the West, and hence Russia, China, and today even Iran, they are looking at SCO grouping as a effective platform, as an influential platform through which they can counter Western expansionism, through which they can counter the aggression being displayed by NATO. So this brings into question the impact of the great game that's going on in Central Asia between these powers, and how does this affect India? Because see, India also has very important stakes and interests in Central Asia. India has great relations with Central Asian countries. We share historical ties with these countries. Even in modern times, especially after the Cold War ended, India has built very close political and economic relations, and even we are deeply interested in exploiting the resources of Central Asia. We were looking at many important connectivity projects to link with Central Asia via Iran and Afghanistan. That's one prime reason why India invested in the strategic Chabahar port and built key road links in Afghanistan connecting important locations like Zaranj and Delaram. These infrastructure projects that India has executed in Iran and Afghanistan would provide us access and a direct connection with Central Asia. But right now, the concern for India is the situation in Afghanistan. Because India's investments, our connectivity projects, they are under threat following the takeover of Afghanistan by Taliban. So India is deeply worried about the future stability of Afghanistan and the future of its projects and investments. On the other hand, we are witnessing this great power rivalry in Central Asia between Western countries on one side and Russia and China on the other. Increasingly, Russia and China are using SCO as a platform to further their geopolitical interests. So this places India in a very difficult spot because we will have to balance the interests, balance the ties that we have with Western countries and also with Russia and China. So that's the reason why we have to closely observe and analyze India's participation at the ongoing SCO Summit. You need to understand in what capacity is India participating, what initiatives is India looking at. So today, Prime Minister Modi, who's representing India and taking part in the summit, he addressed the SCO gathering just a few hours back, and he has brought up few issues and highlighted few key subjects which are the focus area for India at the SCO platform. So if you analyze the speech of Prime Minister Modi, it gives us an indication of India's policy towards the SCO. What importance does India attach to the SCO? The Prime Minister called for transforming India into a manufacturing hub and build upon India's innovation potential as the startup capital or the startup hub of the world. The Prime Minister specifically pointed out that India is today home to more than 100 unicorn startups, right? More than 100 startups with $1 billion+ valuation are based out of India. So the Prime Minister pointed out that this indicates India's potential for innovation, research and development, entrepreneurship, etc. So India is looking at the economic potential of the grouping. We would like to tap the Central Asian resources to further boost India's economic growth. India has a vision, a grand vision, to set up itself as a manufacturing hub, as an industrial hub, by working with lead countries such as Russia and China. Is that clear? Especially Russia could be of great help to India in providing the required resources and also in extending the required diplomatic and financial support. Because see, even when Western sanctions were imposed against Russia, India also bypassed the sanctions and continued its trade with Russia, just like China. India also has never criticized Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. Whenever Western countries brought up a UN vote against Russia, India abstained from the voting. So just like China, India also has stayed away from the Western position, and we have more or less aligned with Russia. So that goes on to show the critical importance we attach to our ties with Russia in particular. We can't say the same about India and China because currently we have tensions going on in the relationship. So very soon, in a few minutes, we will talk about the India-China equation. But before that, focus on the India-Russia relations and what these countries bring to the table at SCO. Both the countries, they share strategic and very close economic political relations. Russia has been a great friend for India, and India also has returned the favor. So in this context, the statements made by the Prime Minister shows India's ambition to use SCO as a commercial economic platform to harness or harvest the required resources to fuel India's growth, to promote or power India's industrial transformation. So India is definitely interested in the economic potential of the grouping. Without a doubt, the economic potential of the group is of great interest for India. This is mainly with regard to resources and as well as with regard to support from these friendly countries. Central Asian countries, Russia, they all happen to be friendly countries for India. Next, another key issue brought up by the Prime Minister was about making our supply chains resilient to disruption. Because in the last 2 years, we have seen that global supply chains have been severely disrupted, first due to the pandemic and later due to the Russia-Ukraine war. Both these events have disrupted global supply chains and they have dealt a severe blow to the global economy. India in particular has been deeply hit because we depend heavily on a lot of critical imports. So since a few months, India is very focused on strengthening the global supply chains, diversifying them so that the supply chains can withstand these shock events. The supply shocks can be withstood without disrupting our economic activities. In the last 2 years, Indian industries have taken a very bad hit due to the disruption in global supply chains. So on one hand, we are working with Western countries like US, Japan, Australia to create parallel supply chains and to build resilience in global supply chains. This is also to reduce our dependency on China because most of the supply chains are dominated by China. But parallelly at SCO, we are seeking the help of Russia, China and Central Asian countries to create parallel supply chains which could be independent of the Western countries. So this projects our all alignment policy. It projects our independent foreign policy that is built on the principle of strategic autonomy. Because on one hand, while we engage with Western countries very closely, while we have very close strategic ties with all the Western countries, we are parallelly trying to balance it out with equally close relations with Russia, China and the others. India, China may not have close bilateral relations, but at least through such multilateral platforms, we are trying to work closely with China. So this act, this balancing act of India is a representation of our independent autonomous foreign policy. Because our foreign policy is rooted on the principle of strategic autonomy, which serves India's national interests. Our independent foreign policy is meant to serve India's self-interest or national interests. So this projects our all alignment policy. That is, we align with every country which serves our interests. We don't really choose sides. We don't ally with any country or with any power bloc. Rather, we engage with all of them equally to serve our national interests. So this statement made by the Prime Minister is very significant because it shows that India is trying to work with SCO as well to strengthen the global supply chains. Then the Prime Minister brought up the issue of food security. He spoke about food shortages being reported around the world as a result of climate change and global warming. And also, the Russia-Ukraine war has hit agricultural supplies and agricultural transportation. So in this context, food shortage is being reported in the Eurasian region, especially in and around Russia, Central Asia, etc. So to counter this, the Prime Minister has called upon SCO to popularize millets. This has become a priority area in Indian agriculture. Along with our focus on cereals, basic cereals, we are promoting production of millets as well, and India has called upon SCO to mark the International Year of Millets next year. At a global level, the importance of millets, the nutritional value of millets is being marked, and millets are labeled as a superfood which has the potential to address nutritional deficiencies and also potentially to solve food security challenges. So India is promoting millet production within our rural economy and it's prioritizing the same issue at SCO as well. So this potentially might create new markets, new export markets for Indian agricultural commodities. Russia, China and Central Asian countries, they could become potential markets for Indian exports, Indian agricultural exports. So that's another significant development during the latest summit. And finally, the Prime Minister spoke about promotion of traditional systems of medicine. This is basically a reference to alternate systems of medicine such as Ayush, that is Ayurveda, Yoga, Unani, Siddha and homeopathy. India has always given top priority for these alternate systems of medicine, and India sees this as a part of its soft power diplomacy. As a part of our cultural relations, we have promoted the Ayush forms of medicine with various countries. So we are trying to do the same with SCO as well, trying to make Ayush forms of medicine more popular in the Eurasian region. And it's also important to note that just a few months back, in April 2022, the WHO, the World Health Organization, has set up the first global center for traditional medicine in India, in Gujarat. In April 2022, the WHO has set up this institution for promoting research in the field of traditional medicine. So India wants to capitalize on this advantage, promote research and innovation, and promote Ayush forms of medicine in other countries. This not only has cultural significance, it also has economic significance as well. So these were some priority areas highlighted by the Prime Minister, and we can also expect India to use SCO platform to bring up many other strategic issues as well. For example, India is deeply worried about the current situation in Afghanistan. India wants to play a role in stabilizing the country. We want to ensure that radicalism, terrorism is kept under check, and we want to ensure that Taliban fulfills its commitment to protect the rights of minorities and women. These are some top priorities for India. Plus, we want to ensure that the large investments India has made in Afghanistan, which is worth around $3 billion, is safeguarded by the Taliban government, and in this regard, we have reached out to Taliban as well recently. Initially, for few months after Taliban took over, India stayed away from Afghanistan. We even shut down our embassy. We didn't interact with the Taliban as well. But in the last few weeks, India has opened up to Taliban. India has officially engaged with the Taliban as well by reopening the embassy, and India is trying to work out a channel of negotiation with the Taliban so that Indian interests can be protected. So in Afghanistan, our primary focus is on countering terrorism, ensuring that Afghan soil is not used, especially by Pakistan, to breed anti-India terror groups, because Pakistan has a history of doing that. Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI, is known to have created a fertile ground in Afghanistan for India-centric terror outfits like Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, and the others. These Pakistan-based terror outfits, they have close links with Al-Qaeda and as well as with the Taliban. They are also closely connected with a notorious faction of the Taliban called the Haqqani network. The Haqqani network in particular is of great concern for India because it has repeatedly attacked Indian interests in Afghanistan. Today, the dilemma for India is that leaders of Haqqani network are part of the Afghan government. The leader of Haqqani network, Sirajuddin Haqqani, who is a globally designated terrorist, he has become the interior minister of the temporary Afghan government. So India has to engage with a designated terrorist whose terror group has repeatedly attacked Indian interests. Indians have been killed in Afghanistan as a result of the terror attacks carried out by Haqqani network. So this is a dilemma for India. So we need the support of other like-minded countries. This could be Iran, this could be Russia, Central Asian countries, or even China. Because as I explained earlier, all these members of SCO, they are concerned about the spread of radicalism and terrorism. Under SCO, the RATS platform can be very effective for India to work with these countries, to work with other SCO members to counter the threat of terrorism. So that is why Afghanistan will remain a focus, and the Prime Minister during his speech today, he even mentioned the need for transit access to Afghanistan via Pakistan. This has been a long-standing demand from the Indian side, that if Pakistan gives us transit access, we can connect with Afghanistan and Central Asia and boost trade between India and these countries and also boost regional economic development. But Pakistan has consistently denied this transit access, mainly due to the state of relations between the two countries. But recently there was a positive development when India sent food aid to Afghanistan after the Taliban takeover. When we tried to help the people of Afghanistan by supplying food and essential items, Pakistan did allow the supplies to pass through its territory, as India was sending the supplies through an international organization. So this presents some hope for India-Pakistan cooperation, and hopefully SCO could be that platform. Maybe through SCO, through better integration through SCO, India-Pakistan might eventually work together, and there might be a far-fetched possibility where Pakistan might give India the transit access to link and connect with Afghanistan and Central Asia. So this issue was highlighted by the Prime Minister today, and that shows that India is likely to use the SCO platform to work with Pakistan on this front. And of course, Central Asia remains a focus for India, mainly because of the resources that are present. Earlier this year, in January 2022, India held a virtual summit with all the Central Asian leaders, with all the 5 Central Asian countries. During this summit, many key initiatives were announced. India and Central Asian countries are very interested in establishing connectivity between them so that India can tap into the resources of Central Asia and we can provide financial support, technical assistance to these countries. So in that regard, SCO is a great platform for us to further increase our engagement in Central Asia. Because see, China is already a major player here. China has already become very influential in Central Asian countries. It has expanded its infrastructure network through the Belt and Road Initiative. It has already capitalized on the resources of Central Asia. So India faces a stiff competition here. There are other external powers as well to be worried about. So in that regard, SCO could potentially be a platform where India, Central Asia could come closer. The reason why I'm stressing on these points is because after the Samarkand summit, India will be taking over the chair of SCO. See, the members of SCO, they hold the chair position of SCO on a rotational basis. As of now, it is Uzbekistan which is the chair, and hence it is hosting the summit. So after this summit, India will be taking over as the chair of SCO. So next year, that is 2023, India will be hosting the annual SCO summit. And this gives India an opportunity to lead SCO initiatives and negotiations. So this is a great opportunity that's opening up for India, because we could use the platform to bring up the key issues that we have, that we just discussed. It could also become a platform where we can engage with China as well. Because as you all know, in the last 2 years, there have been heightened tensions between India and China, primarily because of the border standoff that continues in Ladakh. In the last 2 years, India and China have engaged in a military standoff, and following many rounds of talks and negotiations, just few days back, just last week, the two countries have agreed to disengage their troops from Gogra and Hot Springs area in the Ladakh sector. This marks a major de-escalation in the tensions, but even after this, there are few other sites along the line of actual control where we still have a standoff going on, an active dispute going on. So SCO could potentially be a platform where the two countries can come together and try and address the tensions with regard to their border dispute. The recent disengagement that has happened, I think it's no coincidence. It happened just a few days before the SCO summit. Because see, at the SCO summit, both Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping were obviously expected to be present. So for the first time, the two leaders were interacting after the breakout of the military standoff in 2020. So potentially, SCO summit could have pushed the two countries to work out a disengagement, at least at a couple of sectors, before the two leaders could meet at Samarkand. So this points towards a willingness on the part of India and China to work towards resolving these issues and reducing tensions in their relationship. Because it gives a platform where India and China could interact, they can work together and collaborate as well on various initiatives. So maybe to create a ground for the talks between the two leaders, right before the summit, maybe India and China worked out the disengagement to bring down the tensions and create a platform where the two leaders can interact and take forward the relationship. So this is the reason why the Samarkand summit is so important for us. Is that clear? Another important development that happened today was that SCO has also taken a position on climate change negotiations. Today evening, that is India time, SCO brought out a statement on climate change, and it has called upon the Western countries to accept their historical responsibilities. This has been a long-standing position of developing countries like India, and even the same position was taken earlier by China as well. When it comes to climate change and global warming, a large part of the responsibility lies with the Western and the industrialized nations. It lies mainly with the developed countries, the industrialized nations and economies in transition, which are mainly responsible for historical emissions since the days of the Industrial Revolution. These countries have emitted large quantities of greenhouse gases for almost 100-150 years, and it is through these emissions that they have achieved their economic development. So they have utilized the carbon space, the carbon budget that was available. They have burnt fossil fuels freely for 100 years and more than 100 years and achieved their economic and social progress. So for this, they need to be held accountable, because these historical emissions are the ones which are mainly contributing to climate change and global warming. So since the beginning of the climate change negotiations, since 1990s, India's position has always been that the developed countries, industrialized nations, they should take ownership of their historical responsibilities. Today, under the Paris Agreement, which is the climate accord that we have today, the concept of historical responsibilities has been slightly diluted. So SCO making this statement, calling for a balance between reducing carbon emissions and allowing poor countries to catch up with economically developed countries. This statement in itself is very significant, because potentially SCO might work with other developing and underdeveloped nations to protect their right to continue using fossil fuels so that they can address their developmental challenges. Because transitioning to clean energy, renewable energy for poor countries, for least developed countries, is very expensive. They may not be able to afford these technologies. This would directly compromise their economic growth and social performance. Also, curbing emissions by these small countries will come with a socio-economic impact. It will slow down their economic growth. So SCO's position on this, calling upon the Western countries, especially the developed world, to provide the space for the smaller nations, to allow them to grow, to allow them to use fossil fuels for a longer time, holds great importance. Because it's an indication that SCO is expecting the Western countries to take up more responsibilities with regard to climate action. Maybe they could finance the smaller countries. They could share technology with regard to clean and renewable energy. So these issues might also come up in the future, and that's one more reason why the Samarkand summit is very, very important. Now, coming to the end of the discussion, I would like to highlight a dilemma that India faces when we interact with groups like SCO. As I mentioned earlier, India often gets caught between the two parts of global geopolitics. On one part, we have the US-led world, the Western countries-led world, where US aligns with its European allies, with groups like NATO, and even with groupings like the Quad and the Quadrilateral. Through these platforms, the Western countries are trying to retain their dominance in geopolitics. India has increasingly aligned with the Western countries, especially in the last 15-20 years. Our ties with US have improved drastically compared to the Cold War days. Today, India-US share a strategic partnership in every domain, including in defense and security. We are working with US with regard to military exercises, sharing of defense technology, stabilizing the Indo-Pacific, and we have aligned with the Quad grouping, where we work with US, Japan and Australia to enforce a rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific. So the Quadrilateral, with its objective, is seen as a counterbalance to Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific region. Because in the Indo-Pacific, the rule breaker is China. China is the one breaking international rules. It's breaking international law, such as the UN clause, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. It has picked maritime disputes with many countries in the Indo-Pacific. The Quad grouping that brings together India, US, Japan and Australia is focused on containing this Chinese aggression. Their primary focus is to ensure that China respects the rules-based international order. So on one side, we are taking such a position, which is obviously against Chinese interests, but parallelly, we seem to be working with Russia, China, especially through the SCO platform. Now, this in itself might seem like a contradiction. This is where many countries, especially Western countries, criticize India for not taking a stand. They often say that India makes convenient choices. It doesn't offend any country and works with all the countries. There are critics in Russia and China as well who point out that India has increasingly moved towards the West and they pressurize their governments to not engage with India closely. That's one reason why India-Russia relations have actually taken a small hit in the last few years. Because as India got closer to US, India-Russia relations also have seen an impact. But the other argument is that, the Indian perspective is that, it's not that we are scared to make choices. It's because of India's all alignment policy, where we align with all countries, where we don't choose sides between anyone. It's because of this independent policy that India maintains this distance. India maintains such a relationship that balances both the sides. So the argument on the Indian side is that we are not concerned mainly about the interests of the other countries. Our primary focus is not Russian interests or American interests. Our primary focus is our own national interests. And in line with this, we follow our independent foreign policy, which is rooted in the principle of strategic autonomy. And this dictates that India should work with all these sides. We should work with US, Western countries, and parallelly engage with Russia and even with China. India's argument is that this is the policy of all alignment. We align with every country that serves our interests. We will not pick sides, we will not ally with one country or one group against the other. This has been a time-tested position that India has taken, and India has given a new momentum to this. So, India defends this position by arguing that India is primarily looking after its own interests. But of course, it does represent a challenge because India has to balance out the complicated equations between these rivals. Because Western countries and Russia, China, they have intense rivalry going on between them. So striking a balance between this is not an easy task, and that is the greatest challenge as of now for Indian foreign policy. So on this note, I would like to bring my discussion to an end, and I hope it has been a fruitful session. Do let us know how it went in your comments. Do like the video and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So on this note, let's end the discussion. Thanks for watching.